Welcome to this week's market drama. We'll begin with the S&P 500, which was down 9%. It is now down 13% or almost 14% year to date. NASDAQ was down 10%. It is now down 19.3% year to date. Oil was down almost double figures for the week as well. So what gives, right? Well, there's one headline that drove everything on Wednesday after the close. So Thursday and Friday was really where all the action was, when all the sell-off happened. So on April 2nd, President Donald Trump announced U.S. reciprocal tariffs that were more aggressive than expected, right? If you kind of add them all together, the new tariffs are estimated to raise the effective tax rate on U.S. imports from 2.3% in 2024 to somewhere along the lines of 20 to 25%. This would be the highest in at least 100 years. So market really was not expecting them to be as aggressive. We had a pretty big sell-off on Thursday and Fridays. Essentially, when you look at it as daily performance, some of the worst days that we've seen, right? But to kind of counter that, when you look at the year, this intra-year drop is now around 18, 19%, which is high. But the average intra-year drop, when you look at the last 45 years, is 14%, right? So still not like totally out of the norm. Just to give you some context, in 2022, when like banks were failing, the intra-year drop was 25%. In COVID, 2020, the intra-year drop was 34%. And then, of course, the biggest one in 2008, the biggest intra-year drop was 49%, right? So 18, 19%, still higher than on average, but not totally out of the realm of what we've seen over the last 45 years. And if the market actually believed that these tariffs were going to happen, the drop-off would be much larger, right? To go from 2.3% effective tax rates to 20 to 25%. So what the market's pricing is somewhere in between, okay, this was worse than expected, but this has to be a posture from the government to try to negotiate on tariffs. Because if they were going to keep them as is, it would be much bigger drop-off. So this does create uncertainty. Most likely now this will be weeks, maybe even months until the government kind of negotiates with each country with what the tariffs will actually end up being. And most likely or not, this is going to hit earnings, right? As CEOs of publicly traded companies will have to change guidance around their company's profits in the coming quarters. So not a great week. Having said that, it's not like we haven't seen volatility in the past. In fact, actually, there was a really interesting quote or interesting insight by Peter Mallouk at Creative Planning that showed that when you look at the VIX is a measure of volatility. This week it hit above 45, which is one of the highest VIX we've seen basically since the VIX has been started to be traced. When you look at that VIX above 45 and you look at S&P 500 forward returns for the next year, on average, since the 1990s till today, on average has been 37% returns. So when you look at the 2-year returns from the moment that the VIX hit 45, the next 2 years, the returns on average have been 58% versus all other VIX levels, it was 21%, right? So essentially, this time of high volatility, you would think it's a great time to sell everything, right? But the reality of it is that this high volatility creates opportunities. Now, the key here is for anyone that's listening to this is, look, if you don't have a financial advisor, probably a good time to talk to one and figure out what your plan of attack is, what your risk tolerance is, how much risk you could take, et cetera, based on your current circumstance. And if you can take risk, this is not the time to sell. This is the time to stick to your plan. And in some cases, look for opportunities to buy or to do things like tax loss harvesting that could reduce your tax bill for the following year, right? So that's the key. There's so many headlines coming at you from the news. Their job is not to educate you, is to get your eyeballs to be stuck on those headlines, right? Yes, this is unexpected. Yes, it's created a lot of volatility, but historically, when you see this high level of volatility, it actually creates opportunity for investors. So stay tuned for next week. That's it for this week.